On today's episode of the Launchpad Podcast, we are talking about some of the latest news and notes from the Rockets, Jae'Sean Tate, whether he will get a contract extension, and some Christian Wood mock trade scenarios. So don't go anywhere. We have a great show for you today on the Launchpad Podcast.
Houston, Roger, we copy and standing by for your TV.
They throw it up. Oh, there goes Jalen Green. Humans can't fly. Rebound picked up by Green, who's back in. Plays it ahead of board. Back to Green. Oh, and in time for Thanksgiving. But there's plenty of yams to go around for everyone.
Welcome into the episode of the Launchpad Podcast presented by Clutch City Control Room. As always, I am your host, Don Knock. I'm joined by my fellow host, Paulo Alves. As always, I know how to point in the right direction on the boxes, and he does not. You can find me on Twitter at Don Knock. You can find the pod at Clutch City CR. If you go in the description on the Twitter page, you can find the YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify links. Again, we want to thank everyone that left a YouTube comment last time. Those really help. We got some good comments. We also got some rude comments. So if you know who you are, we will not be not playing the intro music. We worked hard on that. But Paulo, go ahead and tell the people they can find your stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Paulo Alves NBA. That's PAULOALVES NBA. Everything I do from podcasts like this one to the live shows on Twitter Spaces will find itself linked on there.
And today, for the first time on this show, we are joined by friend of the show, Kayln. Kayln does YouTube as well. We're actually technically on her turf right now. More experienced YouTuber than we are. So go ahead and tell the people where they can find your stuff.
Okay, my name is Kayln. My Twitter is K_twice. It's spelled KAY_2 WICE. I do 2K simulations and rebuilds on my channel. My channel is K twice. It's spelled the same way.
Perfect. So in that spirit, we may have a little bit of a rebuild segment coming in the third segment here. But in the first segment, we're going to talk a little bit about some Rockets news and notes that happened. And then we're going to talk about a potential Jae'Sean Tate extension. So today we got good news for everyone that's on this podcast. We got some news from Kevin O'Connor and Chris Vernon of The Ringer. I guess Chris Vernon was somewhere in Tennessee, I believe. He was at an overtime elite camp. The Thompson twins were there, and also there was Paolo Banchero, someone who everyone on this pod at least wants the Rockets to draft in the draft that's coming up, 9 days from now. Vernon said that when he was talking with Banchero and the people that were there, one of those people being his agent, Mike Miller, formerly of the Grizzlies, I believe, and formerly of the Miami Heat. They mentioned that Paolo may be 6'10" and a half with no shoes on. And, that is, we heard 6'10", 6'10" and a half, a little bit taller, but, that pushes him to the range where he's almost, 6'11", 7 feet with shoes on. So, Paolo, how does this change how you view the other Paolo? Is it about the same? Vern also mentioned that he'd heard a lot of good things about Banchero as a character guy. And that, we'll get into some of that other stuff later. But for now, start with those two things. Start with, the height and the character comments by Chris Vernon.
Yeah, I think, well, you got to take it with a grain of salt. To paraphrase what they said, Vernon said that he met a scout that told him that Paulo measured that 6'10" and a half without shoes in a workout that he thought was in Houston. So there's that little connection as well.
I was going to get to the Houston in the next part, but that's fine. Introducing it now, we'll just deal with this all at the same time.
Yeah, well, I think there are two things that are impressive here. The first one is when we're talking about height, usually these guys are shorter than what they're listed at in college. It's something that's pretty common amongst all prospects. But some of these guys also grow. And I think that's probably what happened here. I think it's really, like, if this is true, and he is 6'10" and a half or 6'10" and a quarter without shoes on, that's super impressive. And that now kind of makes you understand why Mark Williams is actually 7'2", because he always looked a bit taller than Paulo. But if you assume Paulo is 6'10" with shoes, and then Mark Williams being a little bit taller than him, like he's 7'1", right? Now that we know that Mark Williams is 7'2", it makes more sense learning now that Paulo might be taller as well. When it comes to his game, I mean, it's all about the mobility, right? How tall you are only it matters, makes the game easier for you if you're a big. We were projecting him to be able to play the three at sometimes. I mean, if you're 7 foot, you're not playing the three. Like unless you're literally KD, you're not gonna be playing the three. So I guess that kind of solidifies him as a 4, but then that also makes it more appealing if he gets some small ball 5 minutes at times. He has a lot to improve on his defense if he is to play that role. But that's, I mean, you being bigger than people thought you were is always a good thing. If I doubt he just became bigger over the last 2 months. So he probably was about the size the entire season, and so it means that the mobility that we saw during the season is him at this height. And if he is that mobile, then the height's only a plus, and it's good to know that he's taller. Once again, I mostly see him as someone who's going to operate out of the perimeter, get downhill, and be really hard to be stopped. Guys like LeBron, like guys like Giannis, who have that size and that skill, are usually really hard to stop, and they force you into a situation where you either play a very specific defensive scheme against them, or you're going to foul them because it's going to be really hard to have one defender defend them. So him being taller gives him more power, makes it easier for him to finish through contact at the rim. He doesn't have to get as much lift. He doesn't have to. This is basketball. Being taller is better. That's what I'm gonna leave at. And if he is this tall, I mean, how is this guy not getting picked number 1? I don't know.
Well, we won't get into that too much, but Kayln, what are your thoughts on what happened, in that interview or on that podcast?
Well, him being taller is a plus. I think it makes an even better mismatch if you put him at the 3, because he does have quick feet when he's scoring a basketball. He loves that spin move. He likes to be shifty. So I think guys like Brandon Ingram and Tatum, like they're both 6'9", 6'10", so they're kind of an example. I don't really want him playing small ball 5, not because I don't think he can't, but I mean centers are just bigger. Like you're talking about, most people are 7 foot, 7'1", 260, 270. I just feel like his mismatch is more being guarded by like a 6'6", 6'7" wing, especially in the Western Conference. Mostly everybody's short, unless you're playing like the Clippers. Everybody's dang near 6'7" over there, but everybody's short. And even if you play most teams in the West at the 4, Golden State has Draymond, who's 6'5". Suns have Jay Crowder, who's 6'6". So he's going to have the mismatch regardless. Dallas has Dorian, who's 6'6". So I like him playing the wing position, but not really small ball 5. I saw the part about him talking about his defense and how he can get better, which is what you want. There are a lot of guys.
Hold on. We'll get into. We're gonna play that clip real fast before we get into that. Okay. Do you want to go right? We can go right into that now, then, so that way everyone can see it before we talk about it. So we're gonna go to the clip, and when we come back, Kayln, you
protection value. Let's go.
Yeah, you go ahead and just comment on it right when we come out of the video. So here we go.
A fair criticism of what you need to work on.
I would say a fair criticism really would be my defensive consistency off the ball, especially just staying engaged. I definitely didn't feel like I was a liability or anything, but there was times where I could let fatigue get to me or be a little disengaged on that end of the floor. But that's probably the biggest thing I've really tried to focus on and work on is, using that, exerting that same energy that I do on offense, and bring that to the other end of the floor.
All right. So Kayln, go ahead and comment on that.
Yes. He was talking about how his defense could be better. Of course, I'm going to agree with that. There were times where I think in the back of his head, it's like, oh, Mark Williams is back there. So if I mess up, like, he got it. Like, he's 7'2", He can get 3 blocks a game. And I feel like that handicapped him at times. because in a tournament, when it was time to step up in late game situations and in the clutch to play defense, he did pretty well. He's not like a Marcus Smart, Mikal Bridges defender, but I think he can be very respectable. Like Booker got better on defense, Jason Tatum got better on defense. Brandon Ingram was not playing defense until Willie Green became the Pelicans coach. So I think it's just a matter of who's in his ear, who's coaching them, and will. I mean, do you want to get 30 dropped on you, or do you want to actually stop somebody on the play? So that's just how I feel about it. I feel like defense is just about effort.
Yeah, and I think this playoffs is a pretty good example, and the last couple of playoffs are very good examples of that. The most important defender on your team is the worst defender because the other team is going to try to hunt that player out and then try to get them in switches, get them in the screening action, make them defend in space, whatever, way they can exploit that player defensively. So if you're Paolo Banchero, right, and you're going to be taking on a big offensive load, you have good size, you have pretty good mobility. So what you really need to make sure is that when you finally do get into a playoff situation, either A, you're just not that worst guy, so you're not the one getting targeted and singled out, or B, you make sure that you do have that level of where you can really flip that switch and turn it up and be there, be where you're supposed to be on, the important defensive positions. And this whole year, I would listen to Sam Vecini and Matt Penny, and they did a lot of scouting of Paolo, back when he was in high school and stuff like that. And their point the whole season was, this isn't someone who has bad defensive feel. This isn't someone that has bad defensive instincts. When he needs to be in the right place, he's going to be in that right place. And, there were defensive lapses, which he himself admitted to, but I think, it's similar to Harden, right? Harden started out as a guy that was, Thunder were using him to guard Kobe, right? And so you go from that to eventually he was I can't remember what they call the video, James Harden defensive juggernaut or something like that, and they roasting all the defensive clips. But even Harden himself, he was someone that took on a huge offensive load, admittedly, right? And that can let you slip on that side if your conditioning's not there. Obviously, that's been something that's been an issue with Harden for some time, coming in a little bit out of shape. He's came in really in great shape, 2 or 3 times, and he had great seasons every time he did that. But, Paolo being in shape will be important. I think, our Paolo has pointed out a lot that Banchero came in a lot heavier this year because Duke wanted him to play up a position. And so it looks like he slimmed down a little bit. And so hopefully with slimming down a little bit, that will help him, be in better condition, be able to play harder for longer. And I really think that's what it's going to come down to, is making sure that he doesn't lose that defensive focus the way that Harden did, and making sure that he does build good habits while we'll see how big of a focal point of the offense he actually is, because this is a team that does have other playmakers versus on a lot of those Harden teams, it was Harden and no one, or Harden and just Chris Paul. So, one of those two guys or Harden by himself was doing pretty much all of the playmaking. So at least on this team, Jalen can handle the ball a little bit. KPJ can handle the ball a little bit. Şengün can handle the ball, a little bit. So, hopefully by not having to take such a big offensive load, he'll be able to exert more of that energy on the defensive end as well.
Yeah, and the most important thing that comes out of this clip is self-awareness. That's something that's really important. It might not be him knowing that about himself. Someone might have told him. But even if you're not self-aware, it's important to have someone who's going to tell you, like, that's a weakness, and him acknowledging the weakness, something that's good. I was in the Spaces today when this news came out in the first, and I'll sneak it in. What people were saying were, well, there's the precise example of the opposite, which is a guy that's really talented but has no self-awareness. That's Russell Westbrook, right? The reason Russell Westbrook is such a frustrating player is all the tools. He is a smart player, like reading the game, but then he has no self-awareness, and he hasn't improved as he got older from his prime until now. He hasn't adapted to the weaknesses that have surfaced in his game. And I think Paolo having that reflective attitude, or at least having someone who tells him what he needs to get better at, and him being receptive of that criticism, is something that's really important. I think it bodes well for his future adapting to the NBA.
All right, so moving on to our next news and notes topic. Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green were spotted. I think they said it was in Tulum, but on vacation with both of their girlfriends. You know, not quite the Bahamas trip with the entire team, but just another example of Jalen and KPJ, getting along, being really close, and we won't say a team bonding event, but a guard backcourt bonding event. We did just have a run of people saying that the Rockets are such a toxic organization that they don't want certain players to come here, and you see stuff like this, and you're like, these guys can get along. Like, this isn't, just totally hostile and things of that nature. But, any thoughts on KPJ and Jalen taking a trip?
I think it's good. You want to be friends off the court, not just on the court. So I think that's definitely a plus. Also, yes, they're on vacation, but they're bonding in friendship ways. They can talk about the team. They can just get to know each other better. And I think that's important. Like, you want to be, I guess, homies with your teammates. And it can definitely translate to on the court chemistry. Like when we saw moments of Josh and Jalen on the court together, they knew where each other's spots were, and they tried to, get the ball to them quicker. So I think Jalen and KPJ bonding, since that's supposed to be our backcourt of the future, can definitely help with their on the court issues with plays, schemes. I think it'll help them be more confident in criticizing each other and not being afraid to do that. Because it's like, yo, you're the homie. I can tell you when you messed up. I can tell you when you need to do better and play better. So I think it definitely helps.
And one follow up, this is inspired by a friend of the show, or at least friend of myself. Trey Klein. I shouted him out a couple weeks ago. Accounts to follow. He's the one that found the mismatch clip earlier with Chris Vernon and I'm blanking, Kevin O'Connor originally, but he had brought up that he thinks that Kisri has been very good for KPJ, and seems like since they've been together, he's been a little bit more mellowed out, a little bit more professional in his approach. And they post clips together, working out and things like that. And how do you think that relationship dynamic has played out? And do you think that it's a similar assessment to what you have, that's been good for KPJ up to this point?
Yeah, he definitely seems more focused and less. Well, I can't really say less hot-headed. We don't know him personally, but he seems calmer. He seems more at peace. He seems relaxed, and it's good for him to have someone to count on and talk to. And she also relates to him since she's a WNBA player, and she can get on him about stuff. But I think it's gonna do wonders for him on the court. You got peace at home. You can have peace at work and have something to fall back on when you had a tough day.
Yeah, and putting my Dr. Phil Oprah hat on.
Here we go.
I've had friends who've had complicated upbringings, just like KPJ had, and sometimes with these people is they struggle to find motivation themselves. They struggle to do stuff for them, and when they're with someone that they care about, that gives them motivation because it's like, well, I'm going to be great, and I'm going to be great because I want to make this person happy. And I think I struggled to say her name, but Kisri, I think her being there gave him someone that he cares about, that cares about him, that he wants to make happy. And he appears to be happy with him being successful at being good at basketball. And him being good at basketball will eventually make it so he's able to provide for his family better as well. And so I think at least from my perspective, that's really good for him. I think he has been really good for him, and I hope that it continues. And then, just from a basketball standpoint, of course, it's not my place to say whatever. But and then about the KPJ and Jalen stuff, I think it's great. I think everything that Kayln said is on point. The only one thing is, I hope that if for some reason it doesn't work out with the team, that them being split doesn't make one of them mad. I think them knowing it's a business, it's also important because you don't want to be in a situation where if for some reason KPJ doesn't work out, or unlikely, but Jalen doesn't work out, and want to be in a situation where you're not trying to move one because you might piss the other off. I think it's important that they make that distinction early on, because you don't want a hardened situation where we went and got Russ because he was his friend, not because it made sense on the basketball court.
I think this is a good place to go to break. We have one more news and notes topic, but it's a little bit more hypothetical. So when we come back, we're going to cover possible trade scenario and then a possible extension scenario. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. And continuing to our second segment here on the Launchpad podcast, we have one final news and notes topic, and that is news that was broken by friend of the show, Nathan Fogg, on a space that we did last night. And Paolo, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce the piece of news, and then we will discuss.
So Nathan mentioned that the Rockets had been trying to move up. They tried 12. The Thunder weren't interested, and then they tried 13 with the Hornets, and they didn't end up reaching a deal there. They're like, it's not a foreclosed possibility, but they didn't reach a deal there. And so we mentioned that, and there was a Trillbro dude who's got a podcast of his own, who's a Sixers fan, said that he heard that the Wizards were in a situation where they wanted Tyson Daniels there, but otherwise they would be open to moving down. And the other guy that they really liked was Ty Washington. And that puts Houston in a very interesting position because 17 is around where Ty Washington is supposed to go. So that would allow Washington to still get their guy and get some extra assets on top. On that space, we talked about trading Gordon to Philly for Danny Green, Korkmaz, and pick 23, and then packaging 17, 23. Who knows? Maybe Christian Wood, maybe not, depending on what the market looks like for him, to move up to 10. And that was something that both me and Nathan really like the concept of, because it's a clear tier above what we currently have now at 17. Yes, you might get Tyrese in there, but at all the way at 10, you're not at 17. You're kind of hoping one of the wings falls to you. At 10, you're above the tier of most of these wings. You're all of a sudden at a spot where you might get a Benedict Mathurin or a Kayln Durant, or if you're looking for a big man in a worst case scenario, Mark Williams, you might get. I think Tyson Daniels obviously can't be because otherwise the Wizards wouldn't trade the pick, but you might get an AJ Griffin if you're interested in him.
Jeremy Sohan
as well, which would be the top of those wings that we're talking about. There are defensive wings that can play multiple spots on the floor. So it was a really interesting little bit, and the Rockets would usually with these trades is a lot of teams in the league could make the same offers for 10, right? The Rockets would be kind of a unique play in a place that very few teams are on, where 17 is right on the cusp of where Ty might or might not be available. Like it would be one of the higher end scenarios for Ty. And we know that both of them have worked for the Wizards, have worked out for the Wizards as well. So it's an interesting scenario to think of because Rockets will have something unique to give to the Wizards. Even Christian Wood, if he's involved in the deal, is something that's unique to them because they are very much in this limbo where they have young-ish players, not young players. Your Kyle Kuzma's, Bradley Beal, Kristaps. Christian Wood fit that timeline as well. So I think there's enough there to kind of speculate a little bit on what you think a good deal would be. Do you include Christian Wood? Do you not? Who is your favorite guy at that pick if the Rockets get there? Who do you think the options will be? I think that's an interesting conversation to have.
Kaylin, how do you feel about potentially trading up to 10?
Trading up to 10 would be heaven. I wouldn't really have a care who the pick is. If you can get a top 10 pick and you really, really like a guy at that spot, I trust on the draft who he likes and who he sees the highest potential in. I would like Sochan, I think that's how you say it.
Sohan,
or Durant at that spot. Especially that would cut all the Paulo and Sengun front court drama. It could kind of end that because Durant is the rim protector and a rim running pick and roll big. And if you can use Christian Wood and trade Eric Gordon for 23 to trade up, I think that accelerates the rebuild as well. The only question I would have would be, is Washington interested in Wood? Since they have Porzingis and they have Kuzma, I think so. I guess because Kuz can play the 3 at times. But I would just question the fit with Wood if that could get done, or would it have to be someone else like Tate or KJ? But I would definitely be going for that 10th pick.
Yeah, just looking at their roster, right? You have Gafford, Kuzma, Anthony Gill, um, Hachimura, Kristaps, Isaiah Todd. So they have not a number of premier front court players, but they have a number of front court players already. If we entered that type of deal with them, I could see. I guess they could waive some of those guys, or they could send some of those guys back. I think they're probably going to want to hang on to Hachimura for sure. Gafford is the one where I think there's a lot of redundancy. Well, I wouldn't say redundancy, but I could see them wanting to keep Gafford, but I could also see them maybe giving Gafford up in that type of trade. And that's someone who, not an all-star level center, but I think Gafford is. Would y'all say that Gafford is better than Bruno Fernando, or would you say those guys are
Yes.
about on the same level?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Gafford was really good when he started for the Bulls. I liked him over Wendell. Then he got shipped to the Wizards, and when he was with Russ, and they were cooking. He definitely helped them jump from I think 11th to 8th, and went to the play-in. So yeah.
Yeah, so that could be an interesting piece coming back if they liked Wood better. But even if you got someone like Ty Washington with this roster, man, I don't know. It's a very like lost in the wilderness type of roster where you have Beal, who's a great player, but kind of behind him, what are you doing? I know there's been calls for them to trade Beal for a number of years now, but if they want to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, I think there are some ways to do that. Them moving Russ in the first place was, one of the first iterations of them kind of doing that. They got KCP, they got Montrezl Harrell, and then they got who was the last guy they got from the Lakers? Kuzma from the Lakers. And those gave them interesting depth pieces, but now this is a team with almost more depth than top end talent.
I mean, yeah, they're losing a lot of those guys too. I think that's another thing is they just lost Harold. They traded him to the Hornets for someone who they don't really care about. I think this is a franchise that's just comfortable being mediocre, selling some tickets, maybe sometimes make the playoffs, sometimes not make the playoffs. They've been a team over the last few years, and ever since John Wall got injured, that has been on the verge, and they've been picking in that 10 through 15, 16 spot the entire time. Guys like Corey Kispert, Danny Abdiha, Riyad Timura, all of these guys, right? These mid-tier prospects, which is why I could see why they'd want to spice it up. And I think clear hole in that roster is point guard. I mean, how long have they had Ish Smith as the point guard? I mean, it's not ideal. And so that's why I say what's his name, the Kiwi guy, if Tyson Daniels is not there, like if you were there, they would just take him and have him be the point guard. If Tyson Daniels is not there, the next best point guard in this class is Ty Washington, I think pretty clearly. And so that's why moving down for them wouldn't make much of a difference because they have the depth. And are they really trying to draft another big or another wing to play behind Gafford and Porzingis, or a wing to play behind Kuzma and
Hachimura.
KCP and Hachimura and Abdiha, right? They want specifically a guard, huge hole, clear hole in the roster. I think that's part of why I think it's semi-realistic. If Christian Wood's involved or not, I'm still not sure. It might be a case where maybe 17 and 23 is enough. Maybe you've got to add Milwaukee's pick next year to protect it like top 10 in case the Bucks explode for some reason. I think there's something to be done there. And with so many teams, I think the two important factors here is we know that a lot of teams are looking to trade down. We know the Pelicans are interested. We know the Blazers are interested. We know the Wizards are interested. We know the Hornets are interested. The Knicks, if they don't move up for Ivy, I could see them moving down as well. Like a lot of rumors there. And so when there's a lot of people trying to do the same thing, it makes it more likely that you'll get a good deal being the opposite end. We talk about when the Rockets are trying to sell. We talk about, if Carousel Levert and Miles Turner on the market, you're not going to get great value for Gordon and Wood. works the same way in the draft, the opposite way. If everybody's trying to trade down, there's a little people trying to move up for what the people trading down want, then you might get a good deal there as being one, as because it would be a weak market for what you're trying to do. So if the Rockets can exploit that, I think it would be a really, like, it would fit like a glove, and it's good to know that they've at least, according to this rumor, explored 12 and 13, which means they are on the lookout for these opportunities. So if one of them crosses Rafael Stone's table, I think it would be something really exciting, and we might get some surprises leading into the draft.
So something else that may be a surprise to some people at this time would be a potential Jae'Sean Tate extension, right? Right
Smooth
now,
transition.
we're projected to get one of Paolo, obviously very near and dear to my heart, or Chet, or maybe Jabari. It seems like Jabari is probably locked in at one of the first two picks, but maybe Chet or Paolo. If you start looking at the way the rotation is going to shake out, they've already said that they want Eric Gordon to start at the 3. You have KPJ at the 1, and obviously Jalen at the 2 for sure. Whether Christian Wood is still on the roster or not, if he's still here, he'll probably get that spot, if nothing else, for a showcase. If they do end up moving Christian Wood, obviously whatever the return package for him is going to dictate, some of who's in that spot. But a guy that, given all of those conditions, could easily get squeezed out of the rotation, or at least squeezed into more of a bench role, is Jae'Sean Tate, right? And Tate came over from Australia, had super value contract, had a first team all rookie campaign in his first year. Second year, I think some people may have soured a little bit on Tate. His shooting didn't really continue a linear increase. It kind of tapered off. Kenyon Martin Jr. showed some flashes of shooting, but his shooting really didn't blow anyone out of the water either. And that's how you get in a situation where we're primed to draft a power forward here. But Kayln, we're gonna go to you first. Do you have any interest in a Tate extension? Do you think that would help make him more movable later? Do you think he's more movable on this contract? How do you see a Tate potential extension?
I would like it. I mean, I wouldn't really have a big opinion on it. We keep him. He'll be here when hopefully we contending. And he's definitely a good piece of the championship team, a guy that isn't afraid to get dirty and play hard and hustle on the court and just knows his role. But if we don't extend him, or we can, and eventually use him to trade him to get something back, I think extension can be positive. Like I said, you can extend him and trade him later on, or we can keep him. He definitely fits when we're making the playoffs and the play-in and things like that. What he's good at is, his rebounding is pretty good. He's good at scoring in the post. I think he will be better off the bench. I think he'll have more mismatches and get to bully more people like he did when he played OKC this year. He just killed them. And they were just too small. They were babies. So I think it's a positive. I think him coming off the bench also allows more spacing, and I think it'll give him more time to work on his jump shot. I do expect it to improve. If not, that'll kind of suck. But I think it's potential for improvement there. My biggest, question mark about extending Tate will be what happens with KJ, because he did show improved shooting, and we were better at times with him. Like, will he just be null and void and be completely out of rotation, or will we have to move on from him? So I think it's just, do you go with the younger guy, or do you go with the championship guy?
Yeah, I think I was having this discussion with Nathan Fogg, and I think a lot of it comes down to numbers, right? Can you get him on a contract that you think he will have value later? I think the Rockets were good at finding what Daniel Theis was worth, because they managed to trade him for nothing, basically, right? It was such a fair contract. They did just, it was basically a free agent signing for Boston. The way I look at it is, it depends on how much money Tate wants. I think if he hits free agency next year, he will get easily MLE money, right? I think a contending team would probably give him the $9 or $10 million per year deal, since a lot of these teams have that anyways, and he would be one of the best role players on the market. That would be a candidate for that. So to me, I would rather trade him. I think a little bit of it comes from who are we drafting at 17, or if we're moving up to 10 as well. If we're going to draft another wing / 4, then I think he has to go, or one of them has to go. It could be Garuba or somewhere like that, but someone has to go. And so the way I look at it is, Jae'Sean's someone who's coming off a really small contract. He was making minimum money last year, and next year as well. And so he's the prime type of prospect that if you extend him, you can probably get him for a bargain, because what he's looking for is financial stability. If you give him good enough money that he's fine for the rest of his life, as an NBA player, right? Because their cost of living is a little bit higher. If you think he's worth on the free market the 9-10 million range, if you offer him 6, 7, 8 million, right, between that, so a little bit above the tax MLE but a little bit below the normal MLE, then it makes sense for both sides, because the Rockets are taking a gamble, right? They're gambling a little bit on his jump shot. They are paying a player who, doing that makes it so you can't trade them, at least for a little bit, until the extension kicks in. And they're taking a little bit of a chance on Tate's jump shot and how he translates to the playoffs. But then on Tate's side, it's like, well, if I get this extension, which would be 3 years, call it $7.5 million, would be $22.5 million, then you're set. Like, you got your first mid-tier contract. You're no longer a minimum guy. You're not under risk of having to go play overseas again if something doesn't work out. You're covered if for some reason, knock on wood, you get injured and you have a career-ending injury or something like that, right? It's a lot bigger of a risk for a player who started his career late and got a minimum deal. Like, I think he would just lock in the bag. Might not be as big of a bag as I would get next year, but I'm taking out a lot of this risk involved. And so if we're getting him for that 7.5 per year range, 3 years, he can have the 3 years guarantee. That I don't think that contract ever becomes a bad contract, and if it does, it's not a hard contract to move if you need to dump him for some reason. His cap hold next year is 4.9 million because he'll qualify as a starter. So it's a 2-3 million difference between what his cap hold would be and what his new salary would be. So you're not compromising too much cap space anyways. So I think it's a good compromise between both sides, and if you can do it for that money, I'm will be really happy with it. If you can do it, even if you offer him right away the $9 million and you maybe it's partially guaranteed on the last year or something like that, perfectly okay with it. But if he's trying to get elite role player money, or if he's trying to bank on being a better shooter next year and he doesn't take the contract, or he wants $12-13 million per year, then I'd say just play it out, see how it goes. Don't do it right away, because he's banking on the highest of his value, the highest of his upside. So you're fine even if you don't extend him, because I don't think anybody's gonna pay him more than that anyways when he hits free agency.
I've got on here since the beginning of last season, and I've advocated to give KJ Martin a larger role. I would definitely be in favor of a Tate extension, if you could get a value deal like you mentioned, but I also would be in favor of, potentially shopping him around this draft. And for the only reason of, I think just where we are in our rebuild, for me, I was listening to some people talk a few weeks ago about, when you really get into your championship window, and that's when your superstars are around 27. And we saw the Celtics get to the championship this year, and they had superstars that succeeded very early on. They got to the Eastern Conference Finals against LeBron when they were very young players, and they got to the finals again this year. And I'm sure they're going to be good again going forward. But I think that real sweet spot of when you want to be going all in with your franchise players is like 26 to 30 years old. And Jalen and KPJ and Paolo, they're all going to be younger than 21 right now. So I think, keeping a role player type guy around for something that I personally expect to happen, in 5 to 6 years, you're going to be looking at probably 2 more contracts to that point. And so for me, I think, Jae'Sean Tate came in as a guy who was already older as a rookie, because he came in from overseas. I think his value is going to be higher to another team. I think he gives you experience, but he doesn't give you that veteran presence. And so I think for me, moving him to a team that's more of a contender, getting someone in there that can be, that vet presence guy in the locker room. I do see some value in that. You'd open up time for KMJ to sink or swim. You'd open up some time for Garuba to not have to be with the G League team the entire year. So for me, I think, exploring those types of options, there's definitely some value and some upside there. But again, if they ended up going the direction of extending him, leaving Garuba in the G League another year and seeing how that forward rotation shakes out, I also have no problem with that. But my initial impulse is definitely to see what they have on the market, see if you can use Tate maybe as one of those move up type of trade pieces. But overall, I think I would probably be more comfortable moving him just for those reasons that I kind of listed before. But that's going to bring us to our second break. When we come back, we are going to get into some of the Christian Wood trade scenarios that these two awesome people, did I point right? There we go. These two people, there it is, went over in a space, I believe it was the other day. So
Yes.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to kind of get into those and see which ones we like the best. Christian Wood, another person that a lot of people would like to see explore on the trade market. So we're in for a good discussion. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. And continuing into our final segment here on the Launchpad podcast, we are going to talk a little bit about some Christian Wood mock trade scenarios. So Paolo and Kayln went over these in a space earlier this week. We've picked 4 of the better ones here, and we're going to go over them pretty quickly. So the first mock Christian Wood trade would be Christian Wood getting moved to the Knicks for Kemba Walker, and we're going to say Cam Reddish. Originally, they said Quentin Grimes. After our little production meeting, we said, that Tibbs probably would want to hold on to Grimes. So we amended this trade so that it would be Cam Reddish instead. And, I'm someone who is high on Cam Reddish. Tibbs, maybe not as high on Cam Reddish as myself. They did just bring him in last year, but he got virtually no playing time while he was with the Knicks. So, not a guy that is entrenched in their rotation by any means. Kayln, what do you like about this trade scenario? And why do you think it would be realistic for the Knicks to do? Because obviously, the Rockets are going to want to probably move Christian Wood, but I think it's good to think of these trade scenarios from the other team's perspective and think about why that they would want to do these trades.
Okay, well, Knicks have a free agent in Mitchell Robinson. There's been some rumors that he might not be back, so they get to replace him with Christian Wood. We know he can shoot the ball, rebound, and play next to Julius Randle and RJ, get him some spacing. Why would they get rid of Cam? I mean, Tibbs kind of was reluctant to the trade before it happened. He basically told them there was really no minutes for him because they have Alex Burks, Evan Fournier, Grimes, RJ, so they're kind of deep at the wing position already. So I think it gives Cam a fresh start on a new team. He does have some upside still. Whether that upside is a bench player or a starter is to be determined. But he did get better at his three-point shooting. He's got better at his free throw percentage, which indicates he can be a good three-point shooter. I think last year he was at, I don't remember. Last year it said 35%, almost 36. So hopefully he can get that up to 37, 38. And I think it'll give him some confidence being somewhere with a fresh start, clean slate, and around a bunch of young guys that he can definitely fit next to. So I think it makes sense for the Knicks to get a starting center and get rid of Kemba, who got EMP'd for a long time. He only has 1 year left, so it's expiring for the Rockets, and then you take a chance on a young guy like Cam Reddish.
Yeah, and then for the Rocket side of it, I guess I'll do the other side. I know Rockets really loves Cam Reddish. I like him as a role player with potential. I think he plays really good defense. I think his shot's been developing looked a lot better last season. To me, the only question would be, is he ready to play that role, or does he still have dreams of being a star player? Because he has the upside to be it, but I'm not sure we'll have the reps to give him to become that. And I know he wanted out of the Hawks because didn't get enough reps. That being said, I think it's value. I think it's a good trade. I think there's 3 variations to this trade. There's this one. There's the one with Quentin Grimes possibly, and then there's one where we swap picks with them, which with Christian Wood and 17, we go up to 11. If they want to trade back, that's another possibility. I think the Knicks are definitely someone. It's an interesting team, considering what Kayln said about Mitchell Robinson potentially not being back.
All right. So the next trade that we have is going to be Christian Wood to the Nets for Joe Harris and the 2027 Philadelphia first round pick. So Paolo, I'll let you take this one first. Why do you think the Nets would want to do this trade?
For the Nets, in my opinion, is you got Seth Curry, you've got Patty Mills. Harris is the third sharpshooter that you have. Like, it's kind of, you don't really need him. You've clearly not got a center. It's been a problem for a while now. You tried DeAndre Jordan, not at all. You tried Aldridge, not at all. Once again, doesn't work. So I think Christian Wood's someone who would provide versatility offensively, and if playing for something could be a better defender. And then Joe Harris is someone who's got the deal that has this year and next year, so he would eat a little bit into the cap space that people are so excited about. But then again, he plays a role that's really low maintenance. You don't really run sets for him. You can just catch and shoot and try to play defense on the other side of the ball. He has good size. So the way I look at it is, you bring him in, you see how he is after injury. The Nets don't have to take that gamble, and it could be that he comes back just as good as he was before. He shoots good percentages, and he is a piece that you could incorporate into your rotation next year when you're trying to make a push for the play. And I think he would be an interesting guy if he were a free agent to bring on. So if he's under contract, that's even better. And if you see that he isn't, he will also be expiring at that point. So it wouldn't be too expensive to just dump him somewhere to some team. And yeah, I think and we get a pick with it, and we get a pick that's like far down the line. It's the Sixers pick. It's top 8 protected, but it's in 2027. So the pick fits the type of criteria that we want, that Stone has shown to want, which is not this year, and as far in the future as possible. So we've got time to deal it. We don't gotta try to flip it for a later pick anytime soon. So I think it's a deal that really it's a simple deal, which is usually a key part that makes sense for both sides.
Kaylin, go ahead.
I think Christian's an interesting fit for Brooklyn. I think he'll be back in his role that he was in with that short time with Harden and the short time with John Wall. He's given us almost 20 and 10, playing like John Collins or whatever for Brooklyn. They haven't had a center, like Paulo had said. They even tried Andre Drummond, and that didn't work. He got DNP as well. So they desperately need a big Joe Harris. He's a sharpshooter coming off of an injury, so he could either start or come off the bench. But if he does look good with us, we can use him as a trade asset to potentially get another pick for, because I think he's under contract for 2 years. So it'll be the last year of his deal and get a pick. And a Philadelphia pick when James Harden is old and Joel Embiid could be on his way out could be very valuable.
You know, it seemed like this year it went away a little bit from shooters that can't defend in the playoffs, but I think Harris has, enough defensive ability to still have at least some value. I'm a little bit down the line with his shooting. The next trade we're going to go to is the biggest trade, the most pieces moving. Christian Wood, David Nwaba, 2023 round 1 pick of Milwaukee.
Let me tee this one up, because this one is a little bit more complicated. So, and you've struggled before when I'm just sitting on down a little bit. When we were doing the recaps of Rafael Stone's trades, you were really a bit confusing. So I'll go through this one.
All right, go for it.
So this is basically swapping Christian Wood and David Nwaba for Gallinari. That's the salary, right? Gallinari's largely been ineffective for Atlanta. He's been basically a spot-up shooter. He's overpaid at that. He's not as elite at that itself as he was before. Complete liability on defense. And it's rumored that Atlanta is trying to move for Gobert. And it's also rumored that they're trying to move up in the draft by trading John Collins. So they're going to need some big depth, right? And knowing that, my proposal was, well, I don't think we're going to get outright a first round pick in this, but I think it might be one of those deals where Rafael Stone doesn't get a first, but he gets like little scraps of value in a lot of places. And the scraps of value here would be, well, this year we would swap pick 17, which we own, for pick 16 that they own. So we're moving up one spot. Not a big deal, but still nice little bonus. You never know. They might be the guys that take Tyrese and from us. You never know. And so we move up one spot there. Then they have pick 44 this year, a second round pick. It's been rumored that we want to buy into the second round. It's something that Stone has done previously. It could be a guy that's a draft and stash guy. It could be a guy to go slowly develop in the G League. You could give him one of those or widely guaranteed contracts for a long time. But it's something that we know Stone like. So it's a mid-second round pick, right? And then you swap Milwaukee's pick next year with Atlanta's pick next year. And so we have the right to swap, which means if Milwaukee is an elite team and they're like pick 28 and Atlanta is like the 5th seed, they're like pick 21, for example, then you moved 8-9 spots, I think best case scenario. And if it turns out that Milwaukee crashed and burned, then you get to keep the pick as well because it's a swap option. You choose to swap or not. So it would be kind of the same vibe as that PJ Tucker deal where we didn't get a first, but we traded a second rounder for a first, and we moved a first 1 year later, which made it more likely that the Bucks could potentially fall apart. So it's the same vibe. You're not getting a first outright, but you're getting little bits of value here and there, and you're bringing in Gallinari, who's someone who's not going to need minutes. If he does get minutes, he could be just a spot-up shooter. You could just buy him out if you want to. He's an expiring deal. So, yeah, Nwaba is not really someone who's valuable for us. I don't see why not.
All right, Kaylin, what are your thoughts on this massive trade?
I like it. The swap option or not to swap is definitely good because if the Bucks have an injury, we can keep that pick. I think Gallinari will probably be bought out. I don't see him staying with the rebuilding team. He could take a mid-level exception or a minimum somewhere else. So I think that's a pretty good trade for Wood. And if the Hawks are moving on from Collins, Christian Wood can play the 4 next to Rudy Gobert. So that makes a lot of sense for them as well.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense from them. And, the Hawks kind of overachieved 2 years ago. And then it seems like they're just not in total fire sale mode, but they may do a lot to shake up their roster. So, when we talked to Michael Scotto on the space that we did last Friday, he mentioned teams that would be interested in Christian Wood are teams that really want to, shake things up and, maybe they underachieved and, the Hawks fit both of the descriptions. So I think maybe not in this configuration, but, potentially in this configuration or potentially even in a different configuration, there's a lot of reasons why the Hawks make sense as a potential Christian Wood trade destination. So we are on to our final Christian Wood mock trade. And that is Christian Wood going straight down I-10 over to the New Orleans Pelicans for Devontae Graham and the Lakers 2024 first round pick. So, Kaylin, I'll let you take this one first. What do you like about this trade, and why do you think the Pelicans would be willing to do it?
What I like about the trade is that Lakers pick. I don't think it gets any better than that for Wood. They looking a little bit old with Russ. LeBron could be out the door by then. AD could be asking out by then. Is the pick unprotected?
Yes, it is.
Oh, that could be a top 10, top 5 pick right there if everything goes down the drain in LA. As far as the Pelicans doing it, makes sense. I mean, then you can trade Valanciunas for some more wing depth if they want to do that. Christian Wood helps space the floor for Zion. I think they kept Val because, I mean, if Zion wasn't playing, you don't really have that problem. But Pelicans are trying to make a second round push, I would say. They did make the playoffs this year, so I think it's an improvement on their part. And yeah, like I said, shopping Valanciunas for a backup guard besides Jose, or a backup wing, or even using him to move up or in the draft to get someone they really like would be an option as well.
Yeah, let me just say something else about this trade. The bad part for us, right? Lakers pick, really high potential pick. I'm not sure if the Pelicans themselves would give us the pick unprotected. Maybe they want to throw some wide protections on there, but I think that can be negotiated. The big deal is we're taking back Devontae Graham's contract, which was signed just last season. He had a terrible, terrible, terrible season. Since then, they've already traded for CJ McCollum. Like, Devontae Graham is very much a scoring guard. He's not a good defender, and he's just there, right? He was part of the Lonzo Ball, Laurie Markkanen, Devontae Graham three-way sign and trade that happened last season, and he just doesn't fit. And they need someone they need a different type of guard with the team that they have. And I think Christian Wood fits with Zion really well. He can provide the spacing, right? And he can play. I think Christian Wood's defense would be a lot better if I think Zion can handle those more bully ball 4s and 5s that Wood struggles with. Meanwhile, Wood can be more of the lengthy defender they put on wings, depending on the front court they're up against. I think Wood in a good team with clear stars will play better defense. I've said that before. Then for the Rockets, yes, that's a stinky contract. He's making. I can make sure right now. Devontae Graham signed a deal that has him earn 11.5 million next season, 12 after that, and 12.6 after that. Right, so it's not a good deal at all.
So it's ascending.
Yes, it's ascending, but you're getting a really, really good pick. The pick has the deferral option. It can be 2024 if you see the Lakers are falling apart too early. Because if you think the Lakers are good enough in 2024, you can wait until 2025 and decide to make the pick then. And I think it's really likely that the Lakers won't be good anymore. I mean, LeBron can only last so long. By then, his son will be in the league, so we know he will want to play with the son. He has already said that. And so it's a really, really high upside pick. And that, in my opinion, makes it worth taking on that contract. In worst case scenario, if you think that contract's stopping you from doing anything, the cost of dumping it, I think, would be less than a pick this good. And it could also happen that he comes here and he plays some good basketball and he rehabilitates his value. It's not an albatross contract, but it is an annoying contract to have. So I would definitely do that. I think that's an under the radar possibility that might be in the works.
All right. So that is our final trade. Which one do y'all prefer? Which one do y'all think are realistic? Leave a YouTube comment down below and we'll get some discussion going there. This probably won't be the last time we hear about some Christian Wood mock trades, but we also are very close to the draft. So, this is definitely the time where things should ramp up. It was pretty dry until we got the Banchero news earlier today. And hopefully we get some more news going forward. But I think, this is a draft where it seems like most of the action could happen from 5 to 15. Like we said, we had trades that were listed off during this show for that specific reason. But I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Don Knock. You can find the pod at Clutch City CR. Go in the description there. You can find the YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify links. Paolo, I got around the time. There you go. Paolo, tell the people they can find your stuff.
Don. Nah,
There you go.
Y'all
I'm gonna put a target on my wall so that way I know where to point.
Y'all can find me on Twitter at Paulo Alves NBA. That's PAULOALVES NBA. Everything I do, from podcasts like this one to the live shows on Twitter Spaces to burn a bunch of Paulo Banchero propaganda, we'll find something on there. And before we go, just for those who listen to us on podcast form, on draft night, if you don't have any plans to go to a watch party, we will be on the Twitter Spaces with a really good guest list. cycling in, live reacting to the draft. So we'll be there through the entire first round. If we trade for a pick in the second round, we'll be there as well. So yeah, if you wanna get your thoughts off, and come live react with some more Rockets fans, I think it will be fun.
Yeah, and I may check in live from the draft, so be on the lookout for that as well. Kaylin, one more time, tell the people where they can find your stuff.
You can find me on YouTube at K Twice, or you can find me on Twitter at KAY_2WICE.
There we go. So until next time, y'all, be safe and go Rockets.